China is the largest exporter of EV cars and will lead the whole world in EV production. China will be the biggest and most important producer and R&D in terms of semiconductor in no time. China will be the leading nation in AI revolution.
President Biden announced a series of major tariffs today on several Chinese imports. The world's two largest economic superpowers are colliding over the future of electric vehicles and other industrial sectors. It comes just about 6 months before the election.
The U.S. is turning blatantly protectionist. The excuses given by the administration or the explanations given by the administration are extremely weak. This is just overt protectionism. It violates the World Trade Organization rules, but the U.S. is just blowing off the entire world trading system rules.
But even with those tariffs, it may not be enough to keep Chinese vehicles out of the U.S.
I know why Chinese cars aren't sold in America. It's because they would dominate. This is the Yangwang U8. It's the luxury arm of BYD. You get LiDAR sensors here, more LiDAR up there. In the front, your main headlights are here, but at night this entire thing lights up and it looks amazing. You get one electric motor on each wheel and combined it makes 1,180 horsepower. And if you need to do a quick U-turn, watch this.
So the US just raised tariffs on Chinese imports goods, and I believe this is just crazy. This doesn't make sense because the whole thing is a straight violation of the international trading rules. That's what I believe, because this is selective targeting, and basically they are targeting China and targeting some of their selected products, especially EVs, semiconductors, and others. And really, this is a violation of the trade rules. What's your thought on this before we dive into the details and how this will impact the EV market and some of the solar and other markets?
For me, the way I see it, there is a big battle of innovation going on between the US and China. And this tariff is just a glimpse of what is to come between these two superpowers. And in this video, speculate a little bit on who is going to win this battle in the future.
Let's start with what the tariffs increase are about. As you can see it here, the implementation or the timeline of the tariff increase is just broken down into 3. So in 2024, the main item here are the EVs. So you can see the EVs there. The tariff is going to increase, is basically going to, that's more than triple.
Quadruple. They are going to quadruple for
25 to 100. It's actually 102% to be precise. 2025, that's going to be semiconductors. That's going to double. And then after that, in 2026, tariffs that will take place are going to be on EV batteries and all that stuff. But if you look at this thing now and you think of the impact like directly right now, this is impacting only, I believe, 18 billion import goods coming from China. But in reality, you have to think of the potential of these kind of sectors as the EVs is going to be taking over, ICE, the semiconductor, which is been driving, the whole AI boom as well. So if you just look at the figures now, you will be like, okay, this is very small. You realize that this is a big deal.
So to me, the way this is gonna, just looking at the tariffs themselves, it's gonna make it very difficult for the US to compete outside of the US. Basically, any analyst, they say that this tariff is to, or not just analysts, but the main reason that Joe Biden is giving is to protect American industries like car manufacturers and jobs in America. I understand that. But at the same time, is it just your domestic consumption that is going to be protected? And what about the consumers? And what about your place in the world?
Exactly. I think you brought up like very two good points. So basically, when these things happen, I just call them like over protectionism of different sectors. And in the short term, you think you are protecting your industry so that they grow well, but you are hurting them basically. So what happens first is that your consumers, they will still be buying very expensive product, while in other countries they are cheaper. So the EVs are going to be cheaper. They are cheaper now in China, in Europe,
in South America.
Exactly. And then in the US, they are going to be, more expensive. And then the second element, which is quite important, is the fact that your local companies, they are unable to compete outside of your country. So as a matter of fact, nobody is buying US cars here now, like Europe, and we don't use them that much.
But if we talk about EVs alone, Tesla has a major share of vehicle sales in Europe.
Agree on that, yeah.
Just based on that, can Tesla now compete with China in Europe and in other markets? Probably not, because Tesla right now is not able to produce cheaper cars. They are working on it, but given these tariffs, this is also gonna stifle Tesla's innovation and the effort they are putting in producing cheaper cars. Because think about it, they are increasing the tariff on battery cells and the tariff on battery parts and semiconductors. They are doubling those tariffs. If those tariffs are doubled, if Tesla was buying these cells at, let's say, $10,000 and now they are becoming $20,000, you have to remember that the battery is half the cost of the car. This is just going to make Tesla cars more expensive, and Tesla is never going to be able to produce that cheaper car and compete with China.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good point. Regarding the cars, I mean, if you were to look at, the whole market, as you said before, if you look at the whole market on the left side here, you see how the market is broken down. This is all the passenger cars sold in the world in 2023, around 75 million. You see that Asia, Middle East, and Oceania, that's the main market. Asia is actually the main market there because they are quite big, followed by North America, Europe, and etc. And in terms of EV penetration, you see that again in Asia there is quite a lot of EV penetration there, driven by China. And China, I believe, they are around 75 to 80% in terms of EV penetration, meaning that for all the new cars sold, 75% of them are EV, which is very, very big. If you compare that to the US, that's around 15%, and Europe 25%, and Africa and South America are not there yet. Let's put it that way. So talking about who is going to win this EV battle, what we know so far is that BYD, which is the leading manufacturer in China, are not focusing on the US now. So on the short term, this is not going to impact them. This increase in EV tariff is not going to impact them, because now they are focused on growing their share in Europe, which was literally nothing in 2023. And in 2024, they are planning to take that to 11%. And they are doing the same already in Asia, where they are quite important, and the same in South America and others. So
yeah, one thing I have to note is that the European Council is also thinking about bringing tariff on Chinese EVs. We don't know how that's going to turn out. Europe has less room to move compared to America, because it's very difficult for them to compete with China compared to America. Economic system is a little bit more dysfunctional than the one in the US. So I don't know how that's going to turn out. But from what my research has said is that most of the Chinese manufacturers that are moving into Hungary and Serbia, they're actually there to help or to support the EV innovation of brands like Mercedes, Volkswagen, and the others, because they produce batteries there and supply it to those manufacturers. So how are you going to block same people who are helping you build your own infrastructure? So that's going to be a little bit tough for the Europeans.
I would say I agree with what you're saying, because the European Commission is not as aggressive as the US. And basically, in terms of the decision of anti-subsidy investigation that they are doing on the Chinese EVs exporters, I think we will have a decision in November this year, or we can have an early or provisional decision by July. And I believe that is going to be a negative one. They are not going to be increasing any tariffs. So based on the reasons that you mentioned, and really, this is not the time to get in a fight with China, really. So they understand that, and I'm sure they are not going to do that.
I remember back maybe 10 or 15 years ago, there was this same thing happened when China was becoming the biggest manufacturer of jeans, and France and some other European countries decided to start banning or increasing tariff on jeans imported from China. And the retaliation from China was that if you increase tariff on the jeans we sell you, we will stop buying your planes. Basically, China said that they will stop buying the Airbus plane if the Europeans increase the tariff on jeans. And that stopped whole tariff discussion. The Europeans didn't do anything, and China became the first producer of jeans.
Exactly. Even in this US situation, right, I was thinking of what China can do in return, right? And two things basically. So the first one is to retaliate in terms of the tariff, which is the example that you gave. So basically, they can go against some of your kind of industries where you kind of rely a lot on them. So the agriculture, aerospace, you talk about planes, right? So they will be like, right, we are not buying any Boeing anymore, or things like that. And Boeing is in deep shit now. So if those demand were to go down, that would be very, very bad. And the second one is basically to go to the WTO to appeal. And they've done that, I believe, that was 2 or 3 years ago when Trump increased some of the tariffs, and they won some of those cases as well. So
China is actually being a little bit more aggressive in this this case, just 2 days ago, it was announced that the CCP, or Beijing, has sold 53.3 billion of US treasuries. If you don't know, China is the second biggest holder of US treasuries, almost 700 billion of US treasuries. They used to be number one, but given all the geopolitical issues that is going on between China, Russia, and the US, China mainly has started offloading US treasuries. And just 2 days ago, they offloaded another 53 billion. This is not good for the dollar.
Yeah.
And as a US citizen and a consumer in the US, I'm thinking about this. Everything is just going to be more expensive in the US, because if you look at these tariffs, that means that if I want to buy an electric car or buy a solar panel and put it on my house, or buy like a big battery as a power backup for my house, I am going to have to pay more just because US is mad at China.
It goes back to what we said before. The consumer is always the end loser in this situation. But regarding this Chinese thing, the truth has to be said. This whole EV thing started like 30 years ago. And in Europe and in the US in general, we've been debating about this. There are a lot of people that don't believe in this whole climate change and all that. And throughout all that time, the Communist Party, I mean, you know how things go in China, right? The Communist Party say it and everybody does it. And since then, these people have been investing in EV batteries and they've been building plants and all those things. And because of that, they've got many years of kind of advantage on the West in terms of these industries. And they are leading these industries now. And these tariffs are really not going to change anything, to be honest with you.
That's true. That brings me to share some of the numbers that I have here as far as market share when it comes to electric cars. If you look at the global EV market, you can see by country, China holds 45% of the whole EV market, US 30%, and most of that is Tesla. And Germany and South Korea, who are like the German brands and Korean brands, are holding about 25%. Looking at this, you see like China has like a big leap forward. In US, it's just one company, you have to remember. It's just the main player here is Tesla. How Tesla is going to compete with 100 Chinese EVs?
That goes back to, the penetration thing that we were discussing before, where in China, we were saying that EV penetration is around like 75%, comparing to the US where it's only 10%. You guys are not buying EVs.
That's true. The US is not buying EVs. And that also brings us to another point. The EV infrastructure needs to be built. And right now, Tesla is the only one actually making, the government is trying, but they are not trying hard enough, right? Tesla is the only one that has all these EV charging station and stuff like that. Unfortunately, they are going through a tough time. And I recently heard that Elon Musk fired the whole department. How is that helping anybody if we want to win at this game, right? So if you look at the market share per brand here, Tesla is number one right now, almost 20%. BYD is following, the biggest manufacturer of EV in China. And the number 3, number 4 are also Chinese cars. And the rest, which are in the single digits of market share, are European and South Korean brands.
Regarding the brands and let's say the manufacturers, basically, a lot of people think that in China there is just maybe 1 or 2 EV manufacturers. There are like hundreds, and the competition is fierce.
Is extremely fierce.
On a monthly basis, some of them are going bankrupt because the competition is just very fierce there. It's not like a monopoly where the government is just giving money to the companies. It's very competitive.
And the funny thing from the US side is that the US is also giving subsidies to these car manufacturers, like a lot. Some of these manufacturers wouldn't even exist without the US government.
Thank you. The last one was in August 2023. They gave $15.5 billion of package to automotive manufacturers. It was a mix of grant and loan to retool their existing plant so that they are more EV friendly and all those other stuff. Everybody is doing it, so I don't know why you guys are complaining.
If you look at the profit margin by vehicle manufacturer, this is not just EVs, but all EVs and ICE vehicles. Tesla, this is why Tesla has a bigger valuation than all these other car manufacturers. Tesla has a 20% profit margin, which is decreasing because of competition with BYD. The second in this is General Motors, which receives a lot of subsidies from the government. And then you have BYD. yes, they are also receiving subsidies from the Chinese government, which is 5.5%. And this is actually due to the fact that BYD's profit margin are low. It's actually due to two things. Cars are extremely cheap and they also use a lot of government subsidies. But if you think about all the big companies in the US, they use the same methodology. If you look at Walmart, Home Depot, Costco, what they did is to crush the small guy by competing extremely hard on price. And once the small guy is out of the game, then they increase the price. And China is basically copying the same playbook here. And the
Yeah.
US is not liking it.
In terms of business model, when you are creating a company, it's usually like a price game or a volume game, basically. So those are the two components of a revenue, by the way. Is either you do it like Tesla, where your price is a little bit higher, you get more margin, or you go volume while your price is a little bit low, and then you just ramp up the volume so that you make as much money as someone that has a higher price. And the Chinese, they have advantage of having a huge population, can start with their market and allow them to be profitable as well.
And if you know anything about how this whole market works, is that some of these American brands actually in China, even though US doesn't want these Chinese brands to come to the US, these brands like General Motors, Ford, they are all in China. They have manufacturers there and they are building cars inside China and selling them. Either the US can do the same thing and allow China to build manufacturing here, or they have to really face reality, because what the Chinese are doing is that they are building manufacturing in Mexico, right on the border. If they start producing cheap cars, believe me, if an American can buy a sedan EV that is $10,000 just by crossing the border, people will start doing that. Who do you think, if we look at all these car EV manufacturers, like the old one who were making ICE vehicles and now are trying to make EVs, Tesla, BYD, who do you think is gonna win this game?
I think that's a really good question. First thing that I would say is that Chinese, as I said before, they've invested a lot in this EV kind of industry, and they are many, many years ahead of European and American counterparts, right? And they are doing some very strategic kind of acquisition and move on the market as well that are very, very, very clever. So one example is Geely. I don't know if you know about Geely Group. So now they are owner of Volvo. So Volvo is Chinese now.
Wow.
So Volvo, do you know Polestar? Polestar is Chinese
Yes.
now. They are the owner of Volvo, Polestar, because they acquired them. These people are very smart and they know what they are doing. Yeah, in terms of the winners, see BYD or any other Chinese manufacturer up there in terms of, I think I said this in a precedent video where I see them as the Toyota of cars, basically in 5 to 10 years. They will be like the ultimate winner. Then behind them, you will have Tesla. Tesla, I think they will be more on like middle class, kind of what the Mercedes is now, right? That's where I see Tesla. And maybe Chinese people, they will be making more acquisition. You never know. These large groups, they just need to kind of acquire 20 or 15% of one of them, and then they will be like the majority owner, and that's game over. That's how I see the market going forward. What about you?
I think you just destroyed my whole argument here, because I didn't know that China was actually buying the manufacturers. So this is world-class strategy here, because if you just buy the manufacturers, you can just sell your car through them, just rebrand them to the native brand. Like if I can sell Chinese-made car and put the Volvo logo on it, man, who cares? Like it's still a Chinese car. Wow. So this is something that people have to look out for. But on my side, I was thinking about this, is that even the 100% tariff is not going to do anything. It's not going to stop China, because they have made too big of an investment into this, own majority of the lithium and cobalt mines in the world. So that means that even the rare earth that you need to make these batteries, they are already locked up by China. So if China decide, okay, I'm not going to sell batteries, nobody can make a car. That's the bottom line of it. Just based on that, over a long-term period, China is going to dominate. The global south of the world is going to penetrate, just like you said, through acquisition into Europe and the rest of the world. I don't know about US, because I don't think our government will allow them to purchase big brands like that. But they are going to attack through Mexico by building cars there. And Tesla will just have a small market share. They can compete because they are the only one to be able to compete currently. Any other brand is impossible. If you look at General Motors, Ford, all the American brands, they are really struggling. Like if you look here right now, Rivian is losing 46% of margin every time they are selling a car. That's not sustainable. One company, we cannot put everything on Tesla. Tesla has its own problems. Tesla can corner the American market, but it's just going to be very difficult outside of the US. So I'm placing Tesla to be number 2, BYD number 1, but it's going to take a couple of years to get there. The best thing for the US to do, maybe reduce these tariffs, force the China to build manufacturing here in the US so that these prices can be kind of averaged out, so that the same car doesn't sell 10,000 in Mexico and 20,000 over here. So they can be like 15,000 everywhere. Without that, just increasing tariff is not going to do anything.
I think you are totally right. The Geely, and by Geely I mean the Volvo thing, that happened in 2010, and it was in the low key or low term. A lot of people didn't know, it wasn't a big thing.
Right.
And at the same time, I believe in 2012 they actually tried to acquire Hammer when Hammer was popping back in the days, but the US government didn't allow that because there was a lot of military IPs and stuff into Hammer as well, because the car came from the military whole thing. But yeah, you are totally right. Okay, guys. We've been working very hard on this AI-backed platform that enables individual and professional investors to query 10K, 10Q, and earning call reports. And this platform is set to revolutionize the way you invest in stock, as it is going to enhance your efficiency thanks to the AI that will quickly process and analyze the vast amount of data in these financial reports, and also highlights the trends, enabling you to make a better decision regarding your investment. And as a matter of fact, all the insight you will see in this video was gotten from this platform. So currently the platform is at a beta version, and we are looking for investors to try it for free and provide us with feedback. So if you are interested, please subscribe to our Substack. The link is in the description, and thank you very much.